and welcome to Author Chat with Andrea. I'm your host, Andrea Rose Washington, and I'm the indie author of Adlathea, the Elendil series, and Amatry's Magic. Today, I am joined by the amazing and hilarious author, Benn Mariner. He is the author of the Apocalypse Wild series, The Many Lives of Zane Montgomery, the Tales of Cubonia series, Hero's Call, and An Honest Living. Welcome, and thank you for joining me. Hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am excited to talk to you because I think this is maybe the second time in we've known each other for like 5 years, 4 years off of Twitter that I've actually heard your voice.
That's two more than most other people. So,
We are living proof that not all internet friends are fake. So,
yep, exactly.
Um, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I think when I first joined like Twitter as Andrea, I did like the writing community tag, and then like I met Christina through it, and then like she retweeted something I said, I think, and then I met you, and then I
Mhm.
remember I saw one of your covers, and I was just like, who did your cover to your book? And then I've been
Oh,
stalking you
yeah,
ever since.
I remember that. Yeah. Didn't you end up doing a cover through him
I've
as
done,
well?
yeah.
Yeah.
He has done the cover for all of my books,
Oh,
Adelathea,
really?
for both the
Oh,
Lindels and Amatry's Magic. Yep, he
yes.
has. He's like doing so many now.
Yeah,
I
he's
put him on to
fantastic.
other people. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, he's awesome. I love Hampton. He's fantastic.
I put him onto other people, and they all asked, "How did you find him?" I was like, "Oh, because I saw one of my friends on Twitter post him, and I was like, who did this?"
Yeah, it was sad. It was sad actually to redo the cover for that one. But it was just the tone of that book is so lighthearted and fun, but the cover, like I was finding when people saw the cover, they thought it was very serious and dark. So I had to just kind of shift it up. But he did such a good job with it.
I completely understand that because they always say you can't judge a book by the cover, but
Yeah,
you
you
somewhat
definitely
always
can.
get an idea of what the book is about from the cover.
Yeah,
And I did buy it off of your old cover,
mhm,
and I still just love the story anyway.
yeah, yeah.
But
Once you start reading it, you understand it's very different than the way the cover looks. But I was at a few cons and stuff, and people were like, "Oh, this looks really like serious." I'm like, "Oh no, it's not at all." You will not. Yeah, see, there's the new cover, which matches much better.
it is also still a great cover. And it still sort of tells you a little bit more about the story and the world that you're diving into than the
Yeah,
other cover did. So I like them both. So I think both of them will still work because the story, in my opinion, your story was good enough to still read if it didn't match the darkness I thought the book was going to be. I'm like, oh,
mhm,
this is just an amazing bunch of characters, a new world, well written. So yeah,
thank
it was
you.
great. I still liked it, and it's still probably one of my top 10 books.
Oh wow, that means a lot. Wow, thank you.
No problem. I love reading things from indie authors. So a lot of my top books are from people who aren't in like the mainstream, who are indie authors. So yeah, the first one from your series, Tales of Cubonia, that's in my top 10 of fun reads. I can like read it in a day, but like only because I don't want to put it down versus it's such a quick read.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of books out. If I did my math correctly in my head, which I'm not great at math, you have like 9, 10 books out or 11.
Um. Oh gosh. I think it's definitely double digits. It's 11
Yeah.
or 12. Yes.
Okay, 11 or 12.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to start writing first of all?
I just kind of I've kind of always enjoyed it. I mean, even as a little kid, my parents had this old electric typewriter that sat next to the phone, which was a landline. So that's how long ago that was. And I love just typing stuff. And I remember writing little stupid, I was 8, 9 years old, and just writing stuff on that. And I've always kind of liked writing, and I kind of stuck with it through high school. like with the papers and things that I wrote, most of them were massive lies that I just made up on the spot to it was like, tell me about a time. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have a time, but I'll make one up for you if that works.
Yes, that works.
Yeah, and then it just kind of carried on. And once I left high school and I was living on my own, I was just kind of sitting around doing nothing. And I had one of those old massive computers that had the big CPU next to it, and I would just sit there and write stuff for fun because I had nothing else to do. And eventually, I had a really good idea for a story about a guy who slept through the apocalypse, and then that's kind of what kicked it off.
And so that is his first book, Apocalypse Wow, which is, yes, wow. Like you think dystopian and you're just like, oh, okay. How do you make, like, when you think dystopian, you think something similar to like the Hunger Games, or you think something to like the TV show. I think when like all the power went out, like you think something a lot really, really dark and heavy, and like, oh gosh, I'm gonna get attached to this character and it's gonna die. But Apocalypse Wow is still a dystopian world, and it's still heavy. It does have some like heavy themes, but it is overall a laugh out loud, fun, enjoyable read because there's so many different like 90s references you throw in there, and like a lot of jokes are for us. And by us I mean our age group. So it's a fun read, and it's a different take on dystopia than you think it would be if you ever saw it through any other medium. So you say you were bored writing it on your computer, but like what brought the entire series like together? Like when did you decide, okay, I'm going to take this from a fun story idea to this is now going to be the series and like the launching part of like all of my writing?
Um, it's hard to say. When I finished, okay, so there an original draft of the first Apocalypse Wow book was finished in it was like 2004 or five, so way before the most recent. It was very different. Wasn't in first person. Had absolutely zero 90s pop culture references in it, and the ending of it was very final. And I just kind of, I guess I just didn't like it very much. And then I read Ready Player One, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is like, I loved it. I burned through it in like 2 days because I liked it so much. And I, it just kind of like struck a chord with me. So I basically, I didn't really scrap the whole first draft. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the bits and pieces are still there. But I pretty much rewrote the whole thing from scratch. And when I got to the end of it, I was like, yeah, I don't want to make it so final. I don't want to just have one book. This was a lot of fun to write. Coming up with like the chapter track for each chapter and the title that's specifically referencing something from the 90s. It was just a lot of fun, so I didn't want to stop. And so I left it open ended, and just kept going. And once I was finished, I was like, I had a lot of fun. I just want to do more. I want to write more. I had a lot of fun with these books, and I just want to keep on keeping on.
So I think the first one that I read from you was, I think, the Tales of Cubonia. I don't know why I cannot pronounce that today. Because I tell people about it all the time. So that is sort of a shift, theme wise, story wise, and almost like concept wise from Apocalypse Wow. And it takes place on a fictional world, which we all
Mhm.
love fictional worlds. We all love fantasy worlds. But where did this one come from? Because it's not really like, in my opinion at least, it's not really close to Apocalypse Wow in story at all. Like
Yeah,
I feel like Apocalypse Wow was more, well, dystopian, and then this one is like, oh, let's go on a journey. We're going on a trip.
yeah, yeah. Apocalypse Wow was definitely more personal. There, like the relationship between the main character and his lady, there was definitely from a more personal place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And this one was it's just fun. Absolutely love fantasy books. I was huge into Lord of the Rings in high school when the movies came out, and I read all the books like 3 or 4 times because they're fantastic. And I just wanted to write like a fantasy book, and the concept for the storyline, at least, about a princess that gets kidnapped by a witch and then somebody has to go save her. That was actually many years ago. I used to, when I got bored, I would ask friends for like a person, place, and a thing, and then a genre, and I would just write a short story for them, um, including those things and in that genre. And I don't remember what the person, place, and thing was, but they said fantasy, and it was kind of a short story that was basically the exact plot of The Golden Hourglass. And so I always kind of liked it. And eventually I kept going back to that idea, and it just kind of developed and grew. And the cubed planet is, I kind of got that from reading the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, which is on a flat disk planet. And I was like, well, that's super cool. Like, it's not just a normal round whatever. Like, it's something outside of the box. And I love that. And I wanted to do something similar. And I guess a cube is the first thing that popped in my head. Like, what's the most interesting thing? But deciding that it was going to be a cubed planet also made the decision that it was going to be 6 books, each of which were going to take place on a different side of the planet.
Good choice with that one, because I think I read. You have asked me to proofread. I think it was the third one. I want to say. I think it was the third one. I don't want to say the storyline too much because I have the habit of like revealing everything. So, um, and
It's been out there for a while.
And even though the one that has like basically the X-Men version, that's all I'm
Oh
gonna
yeah,
say.
okay, yeah. It's right there.
Um,
It's right there behind me.
oh, is that the third
Yeah,
one or is it the second one?
that's the third one. Yeah,
It was the third one.
yeah,
Because I didn't read them in order, and that's one thing I actually like about this series, is that you didn't really have to read them in order. You can read them in whatever order you wanted to, because each story was sort of independent of each other. And I thought that was a great take on it, because it is all a series. It's all something that sort of flows together because it all takes place on the same world, but there's no particular order that you have to read them in. And I like that because I think I read the third one before I read the second one. So it's like, oh, am I going to ruin something for me? You're like, oh no, you're not. It's gonna be fun.
yeah,
Still do it.
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing with that series. What I wanted to do is everyone has that fantasy series that goes book 1, 2, 3. If you don't read them in order, you're completely confused. And um, I wanted to write books in a series, but I didn't want to be constrained by the same, kind of like with Apocalypse. Wow, the storyline goes through all 3 books. I didn't want to be like constrained to that kind of a format. I just wanted to write fun stories. And you'll see different characters pop up throughout the series in different books and in different places and times of their lives, but they're never on the same kind of story path. And that's one of the most fun things about writing that series, is that I can just do whatever the heck I want. I don't have to keep with any kind of timeline or anything like that.
So speaking of that, how did you keep that separate in your head? I know for myself, just trying to remember all the characters from book 1 for book 2, and then where I left them off was already hard enough. So like, do you have? I have what I call like my master book of like all the characters that I've put in every single book, so that way I
Yeah.
know, one, not to use that name again, but like two, like they can't like I can't have them alive if I killed them in another book.
Yeah.
So how did you plan to keep all of that straight, or are you just able to keep that all in your head?
Oh, no way. Like for the first 2, I was able to keep it pretty straight, because there wasn't a lot to work with. There
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a lot that had already been mentioned. But once I started branching out to the other ones, like I got to do something else. I can't keep all this straight. I can't keep going back to these documents and doing a control F and looking for something.
Yeah.
It's too cumbersome and time consuming. So I have a master doc of everything. I went through and I reread all the books and
Mhm.
wrote down all the characters and places that were mentioned and any little tidbits that I might want to bring up later. So I have a huge document that's full of that kind of stuff to keep my head straight.
Well, that's good because I will say this: I was very, very Hebrews in the very beginning of my writing when I wrote Adlethea that I could remember everything, and I will never forget a single. I was like, I'll never forget a single thing about my book because I wrote it. What do you?
Yeah.
And then I was talking to someone who was doing something else for it, and they had questions about a character, and I was like, I have a character named that in my book. Because I hadn't gone back and looked at the document, and it's just like, okay, let me go ahead and make this because even though that one is a standalone and I don't have like a sequel plan for it, it was still just like someone asked me a question. I was like, I don't know who you're talking about. Like one of the, like that person's in your book. Oh, he is, isn't he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when you write it years and years go by, like I don't remember what's in there anymore.
It's like I know the overall story, but
Yeah.
like I forgot that storyline was in that one. It's so great. Like you think you would remember everything because like you created it, but no. So, what is your writing process like when you go from start to finish when you're trying to do a book? Because you have Apocalypse Wow, which is a series, so you had to do 1, 2, and 3 in order. But then you have your Tales of Cubonia, which you don't technically have to write in order, but like you are, but the stories don't have to flow in the same timeline. And then you have like a couple standalones. So like, how do you plan your writing when it comes to all of these different stories and like the way that they're paced and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really plan anything. You just kind of have it. I used
What?
to, I used to just, especially with Apocalypse Wow, I was a lot younger and I was still new to it. I was so excited to be writing and, um, like I kept going. I finished all those books in pretty quick succession because I was like really excited to write them, and I was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of going with it as it came to me. But nowadays, I definitely it's harder to find time to carve out for writing. First of all, I kind of keep a loose outline of things. You know, if idea, oh, I want this to happen, or I need to mention this, whatever. I'll write it down on like a notepad or whatever, and come back to it. It's not like a very strict outline, and a lot of times it gets deleted and forgotten about. But I don't really have a process per se. It's just kind of like I'm gonna write, and then ooh, I thought of a good thing. Let me write that down, and maybe I'll come back to that if I remember that that's there, which I don't a lot of times. Um, and even when I write it down and I'll get to the end, I'm like, oh, I forgot to mention that, and then I desperately try to go back and see where I can shoehorn it in, which doesn't always work.
That is a definite issue I have as well. I definitely try to shoehorn in ideas that I think of after the fact. I'm like, oh, can I add that
Yeah.
chapter there?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I can do that. If I do that, I'm gonna have to change everything else
Yeah.
after the fact. If it's like a
Everything.
um, so when I wrote the sequel to Elendil, I changed one sentence, and then in changing that one sentence, it changed the end of my. It changed like the
Yeah.
latter half of my book. Have you ever had that instance by accident? Because I changed the sentence and it
Um,
changed it by accident. I didn't plan it, but have you ever had an instance where one line just and you had to throw away like 40,000 words?
I don't think I've ever had anything that extreme. With the most current Cubonia book that I'm kind of in editing on, I've definitely gotten to a point where I'm pretty much going to have to scrap like the last 10 chapters, maybe even more, and rewrite them just because I
Mhm.
thought of a better way to go about things. But I don't think I've ever had something that extreme where I've just changed one sentence and the rest of it all fell apart. That's pretty intense.
It was a major character shift, and because of that, every time that character came up, things had to be different than how they handled it. Oh, I was so upset at myself for doing it, but like you said, it was like a better way of
Yeah.
telling the
Yeah.
story. And so then you become a rock and a hard place. Do you change the story for better, or do you keep a story that's still good, but it's not,
That's good.
not as good? And who
Yeah.
would know but you? But
Yeah.
unless you tweet about it like I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, if it makes the book better to you, then you made the right decision. So
That is true.
no
That
matter
is
how
very
much
true.
work it takes.
So we're gonna go and talk about one of my favorite books from you, and it's called A Hero's Call. And I'm still upset with you because even though I have no right to be upset with you, because I have people yelling at me that I didn't do a sequel. Yes, for that one, I didn't do a sequel for one of my books because I don't intend to. A Hero's Call, that me telling them I didn't have a story, I don't have a story for Adlethea anymore, which is why it's only a standalone. Doesn't like you don't get that leeway. I need a sequel. So this one, this one is your superhero. It's a different take on superheroes, and it's not like DC. It's not like Marvel, and it's not like The Boys because that's a whole nother genre going
Yeah,
down. But it's
I
a
don't even know what that is.
me neither. But it is a fresh retelling on superheroes in like a family setting, and I didn't really know what I was getting into when I read it. I just like superheroes, and it was such a great story about family and friends and like believing in yourself. And I was like, oh, you go, like you got this. When are we getting a sequel to that?
I don't know.
If we are, I'll be nice.
You
If we are,
will, you will. I promise that much. So once I wrap up the Tales of Cubonia series, the main 6 books, I am going to branch off and start, returning to those one-off books that I wrote and never got back into the series, and that's probably going to be the first one because the the idea for it has been in my head, and the second book is like half written. But every
mm-hmm.
time I try to like sit down and get back to is something that there's just a block there, and I think it's because I'm in the middle of the Cubonia series, and it's just like demanding more of my attention. Like the ideas are more fertilized for that, but you will get it hopefully within the next couple years.
Okay,
It will
I
come
can wait.
eventually.
I can
I love the book. I love the idea. I love the alternate history
wait. Mm-hmm.
of the world, pretty much
Yes.
that involves superheroes, and um, so I do want to get back to it, and I do know there's probably like 4 or 5 books within the series that I have in
Oh,
my head. So and I kind of basically know how it ends, like the whole series. So
you can tell me
I
offline.
haven't haven't abandoned it completely, but I will get back to it eventually because I do love the book and I love the characters and I loved making up superheroes. Like it's so much fun. Their powers, their abilities, which in book 2 are starting now to evolve and
Mm.
grow into what you didn't see in the first book. They're getting more things, and um, it'll be fun. Once I get back to it, it'll be fun.
Awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the question that I probably will ask every author that I interview because it's always asked to me at every Comic Con when I am selling a book. And I have more than one, so people are like, "Oh, well, I can only really get one right now. Which one's your favorite?" I can never really answer that question because I always akin it to, it's my child. I created this. I can't choose which one I love the most.
Yeah,
Do you have a favorite? And if you do,
absolutely.
which
Yeah.
one is it and why?
I definitely do, and I don't really have to think about that. It's
Oh,
definitely the first book, The Golden Hourglass, the first book in the Cubonia series. Um, it was just that book where I don't know, it just like opened up this entire world of imagination where like anything's possible. Um, there's no rules. It's a completely different planet. It doesn't have to be governed by the same science that we use in
Mhm.
reality, and like magic and monsters and sticky buns, and it's just so much fun
I need a sticky
to
one
write. And like we had mentioned before, we're both big fans of the show Psych, and when I was writing it, the main characters, Broderick and his little sidekick Adam, they're Barry, Sean, and Gus, and they're very much written with the intent of like Dule Hill and James Roday. If they were to ever make a movie out of that, that's who I would want to play them. They're my favorite comedy duo ever, and
They would be amazing as the
it's
lead,
so
yes.
much. It was just so much fun to write, and it's still so much fun to write. But that's what started it all. So that's been my favorite book ever since I wrote it.
Okay, so the next sort of goes into my next question, which I'm guessing is the same answer. Which one was the most fun for you to write? Um,
Um, it's actually not the same answer.
oh,
So
okay.
the right now the fifth book in that, yeah, the fifth book in the Cubonia series, which the first draft is done and I'm working on edits, but so far that's been the most fun to write because it focuses on um, the first book starts off with a goblin assassin trying to kill the main character of that book, ultimately dying himself. Don't worry, it's not really a spoiler because it's the first chapter of the first
Taking it there now. He's taking it
book.
right now.
So, but it follows his whole life story and how he became an assassin, but ultimately gave that up for learning how to cook, which isn't a something that goblins do. They don't care about
You are
cooking. They
not
don't
going to
have
make me
talents.
care about this person. No.
He's so much fun to write because he's a goblin, so he's very violent, and he's an assassin. So every time he meets somebody, he's scanning them for weaknesses, and but he wants to kind of like shed that skin, that violent goblin image, to become a gourmand and learn how to cook and be the first goblin to join the gourmand ranks and actually become a chef. And I'm really into like cooking shows. My wife and I, we watch them constantly, like Guy's Grocery Games and Iron Chef and those competition shows. So it's kind of that kind of works its way in there as well. There's a whole cooking like competition underground thing that is going on, which he's obviously going to excel at because he has been trained to kill. And so it's just been so much fun to write about cooking. And then this whole, because there's a lot of like racial, because he's a goblin and everyone hates goblins, so there's like
Mhm.
that component of it as well. So there's a lot of I pay a lot of homage to the celebrity chefs that I love, like Chef Amperel and Bobby Flay and Guy Fieri. He's even got a character in there, and
That's
it's just
great.
been a blast to write.
Oh, I cannot. So I don't know. And I don't know if you know this. I don't really tell a lot of, well, I don't tell people anymore. So I actually went to culinary school. And so I am very looking forward to this book because I want to read your take on culinary shows. I'm going to let you know right now that I refuse to let this guy have a redemption arc in my mind. All because of like his 2 pages in the first book. I'm going to be salty with him.
Yeah, I did know that about you. I've seen you post some pictures and stuff, and so I did know that, and you are definitely on the list for beta reading because I want your take on it as well. So you'll be one of the first to read it.
That's like probably one of my favorite things about like knowing so many indie authors is reading their work before it comes
Yeah,
out. And just to sometimes I'll admit, like sometimes it does take me a little bit longer to get through it because like if I'm in the middle of something in a similar genre, I don't want to read it at the moment. So I only like read like high levels read to like, you know,
hmm,
I don't want to get to take any ideas from your story and putting it into
right,
mine, but like I
right.
also want to make sure I can get it to you when you need it done. But it's always still so much fun. It's
Yeah,
always so much fun,
yeah.
and
I
I
love it.
cannot wait for that one.
Yeah, I love beta reading for people. It's so much fun to see their work in progress and be able to lend a helpful hand if they need it, which a lot of times they don't. And but it is cool to see a book before anybody else gets to see a book. It makes you feel special.
Oh, yes, yes. I feel so special in our world.
But
Um,
this one's I definitely feel like it's a fantasy book unlike any other fantasy book that anyone has ever written. So I'm really
okay.
excited to finish it and get it out there. Um, I'm excited for it.
I am excited as well. So you've done something different than I've seen other authors do. At least authors I'm like personally familiar with. So you wrote a book that's a sequel to someone else's series, and it's An Honest Living, and it's a sequel to like our mutual friend Christina's book. And the title of it is escaping me right now. I had it and I just lost it.
Hers is a shot at the big time.
Yes, A Shot
Yeah,
of the Big Times, and it's a different take on superheroes and villains as well, which is why I also sort of love it. And this one I think is like more of a cross between like a PG 13 The Boys, of like how it's not really, it's a prophet in there somewhere, but um how it's like sort of set up in a world similar to that, but like not as dangerous people, not as
right.
there's some things I can't get out of my head because of the voice. But you wrote the sequel to her first book, A Shot of the Big Time, and this one I think it follows her brother of the brother of the main character from the first book.
Right.
How how does that work to write a book that's already in a world that's created, but you didn't create it, like you're writing it for someone else?
Mhm.
How did that come across?
That was actually really fun. I actually don't remember whose idea it was for. So Christine and I and CB Archer, who's also written in the series.
He did the third one, correct?
Yes, yeah. We're great friends. We all have very similar sense of humor. And I don't really remember whose idea it was to kind of like join. I think I might have mentioned when I read A Shot at the Big Time. Um, I really connected with Lane, who is the main character's brother, who my book is about, and I really just kind of wanted to write a story because he felt like me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had like a personal connection with this character. I was like, oh man, that sounds like so much fun. And then ultimately, she was like, okay, go and do it. But I kind of defer to Christina's, she gets final say on everything that goes into the book and everything about the world that she created. I'm just kind of writing the books. So I'm kind of like, she's more focused on like the villains within the city that's running rampant with superheroes, and I kind of focus on the good guys, while CB deals with like the neutral people who have powers but they don't take a side. Um, I don't know. It's so much fun, and she's about to or has released another book within the series, and I have an idea for another one as well that I will eventually get to. Um, it's interesting. I haven't really seen anybody do it either, sharing a series with other people, and it's led to some interesting conflicts on Amazon with like getting it uploaded and
Yeah.
connected with each other because it's not the same author for all the books. But it's been a lot of fun. I love working with both of them. They're so much fun, and they write such great books.
Yeah, because when it first came out, I was like, that's interesting because I've only seen I've seen a group of authors do like a collection, but like
Mhm.
where none of the stories were actually related to each other, but they all had like a similar theme.
Right.
I think there was a big one on Audible for a bit where they had like six different like sci-fi fantasy shorts from like
Mhm.
names in the industry, and so
Right.
it was a collection altogether. But none of the stories were connected. So I was like, oh, it didn't really matter. But this was very interesting. So I was like, oh, because then I, that's a good amount of trust that you guys have in each other when it comes to like writing in someone else's world. Because I feel like I'm so sometimes when it comes to storytelling, a nitpicker was like, no, I need you to write exactly what I say.
Yeah.
Because like this is a feel I have for my character.
Yeah.
Um,
It definitely takes some trust, and like I said, I always defer to Christina. Um, if I write something she doesn't feel fits within the theme of the world or whatever, um, she has no problem saying so, and I have no problem changing it. And that's, I think, kind of what you need in that situation is to be
Hmm.
flexible and be willing to edit and change yourself. And a lot of writers are not like that. So
Yeah.
that's probably why you don't see it very often.
It is a very personal thing, writing, and it is very
Yeah.
hard to, in the very beginning, you have to really learn to take constructive criticism well, and then to
Yes.
take rude and to like throw away rude criticism.
Yeah.
Like you understand there's a difference, and then you
Hmm.
have to like allow yourself to accept constructive, and then ignore the people who are just trying to be rude. And it's a very thin line in the beginning that you have to figure
Yeah.
out.
You gotta get some tough skin. You gotta
Yes,
be able to recognize when, like you said, when somebody's just trying to be an a-hole. You just kind of like push them aside and you're like, okay, if you want to give me something constructive that I can work with, beautiful. I want to hear it.
hmm.
But if you're just like, this is stupid, I hate it, like that's not helpful. I don't care about your opinion.
Like, I don't really expect everyone to love my book, but if you don't like it, don't review it. I have
Yeah.
a I have a line that I tell people when they buy my book at Comic Cons. I say,
Mm.
if you love it, leave a review. If you don't, just send me your personal email. You don't have to tell no one else. Just let me know you
Write
didn't
me a
like the
letter.
book, whatever. But like you don't have to post it.
Yeah.
um.
You know,
So
the thing is, I've actually found that like the negative stuff kind of helps. It a lends some kind of credibility to it. You know, somebody read it
that is
and
true.
didn't enjoy it, but it also makes people think like, because I've read negative reviews, like, okay, well now I have to check this out
Yeah.
because I want to see if I agree with this person or not.
That is a true take, because I do have a couple 3-star reviews where people have commented that it just wasn't for them. Like it wasn't a bad
Mhm.
story, but it just
Yeah.
wasn't for them. And those are fine. Those are fine. But I've also had like a 5-pager, like, oh, you just wanted to rip me a new one. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Bye.
I have a 1-star review, and I'll probably remember this review forever. For the Many Lives of Zay Montgomery, she was highly offended by some of the ideas that I posed.
Hmm.
Um, just the so the book, for anyone who's listening, is about a guy who has lived many lives throughout history, and he remembers every single one of them. Um, and there's one of his lives where he was the one of the three guys, or one of the two guys who was crucified next to Jesus. Um,
Oh my god.
and so she didn't really appreciate that so much. She left a
Oh,
pretty
I can
snotty
definitely see
review.
how that made some people upset.
No, and it was mostly not necessarily that like I shouldn't have written it, but I definitely took it at a humorous tone, like I do with everything, and
Yeah.
that's not a humorous topic, and she did not appreciate that. So
Oh, I can definitely see some people having an issue with that, but I can also understand some people understanding that it's okay to make jokes about some things.
yeah,
And it's all relative to sometimes understanding, was their intent malicious or was their intent to make people laugh, and then to
right,
go from there.
exactly.
Um, So, as we're nearing the end of this of our chat, what advice do you have? Like, if you could talk to yourself back at the first Apocalypse Wow, like before you published it, what advice do you have for yourself now that you would have like told you there that could possibly help other people as well?
I don't know if I would give this advice to myself because I have always kind of followed this advice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to just to have fun. Like if you're writing, like you need to be writing for the fun of it, not for
Mm-hmm.
the money, because the money, especially if you're going the indie route, the money isn't going to be there. At least not at first.
Mm-hmm.
And so you should be writing to have fun, because when you're writing and you're having fun writing, then it shows. Your readers will be like, ah, this is fun. They were
Yeah.
having fun. It's a fun book. I'm having fun because they're having fun too. Um, don't worry about reviews. Don't worry about sales. Don't worry about any of that. Just write what you want to write and have a great time doing it. If you're not
That
doing that, then you shouldn't be doing it at all.
that is actually great advice. And I try to live by that advice as well for myself. Write what you want to read,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's, as long as you like it, that's good enough. Because I always have to remember, There are books that I don't like, that I'm like, okay, I didn't finish this because it's not my cup of tea. But this,
Yeah,
because it's not
me
my
too.
cup of tea, doesn't mean it's a
Yeah.
bad book.
Mhm.
So that is great advice. That is great advice. Everyone who's listening to this, or whenever they do listen to this, take that advice when you're writing. Write for yourself,
Yeah.
not what's hot right now or what's selling right now, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Um, Write what you enjoy to read.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Nobody was asking for a book about the apocalypse laced with '90s pop culture nostalgia. Nobody asked for that. I wanted to read it. That was my thing. I'm like, this will
Yes.
be fun, so I did it.
And I'm glad you did, because that's actually reading it. I was in very disbelief of like, what is this? This
It's
is not what I
it's
thought this was.
it's bizarre. It's bizarre, and I know it's
But it's
bizarre, but that's the point
enjoyable
of it.
though. Like,
Yeah.
once you get out of your head of what you think it should be because it's dystopian, it's like, oh, am I laughing at this? This is, I'm
Yeah.
okay. Next page. Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm invested. I need to know how this ends. What is he doing? What is he? Where,
Right.
dude? What are you doing?
Yeah,
The book got me at some point.
I do love that series because it was kind of like Cubonia as well. Like there are no rules.
Yes.
The world has ended. It's
Mm-hmm.
chaos. It's mayhem. Anything can happen, and I wrote it even in such a way that even the things that happen that are absolutely ludicrous and make sense within the world that's
Yes.
created there.
Yes.
So it's I know a lot of people have read them are like this is wacky and it doesn't make any sense. I'm like it does make sense.
It does.
You just have to read it. You just have to appreciate it and for what it is and keep going and suddenly you'll be like, oh okay, I get it.
You have to get out of your own head and
Yeah,
assumptions of what a dystopian is supposed to be. Because, like I said early in the interview, in the chat, that you think of dystopian, you think of dark, gritty,
yeah,
like people's like, oh my gosh, like how are we going to survive? Oh, like do we even want to survive? Like, do you want to
yeah,
survive an apocalypse? I don't know if I want to survive an apocalypse. And then you get something, you're just like, I'm rooting for you. I love every single word I'm reading. What happened? Wait, how did you sleep through it? What is okay?
yeah.
Okay. I
That's
need
just like what I like to do with writing. I like to take a concept that nobody laughs at and try to make it funny.
and you
One
it
of
works
these
so well.
days, I want to write a book about what really happened on the Lewis and Clark expedition, like which will involve like unicorns and like all this crazy stuff that was ultimately just like pushed aside because nobody would believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only thing that was put forth was like this basic scientific expedition study of the country that they're traveling through, but that's not really what happened. Um,
That is going to be hilarious, and
there's just
I
no
cannot wait to read
there's like
that.
no true comedy from like frontier times and the colonial era and stuff.
And
There's
how would
there's
we have
nothing
known?
fun.
We weren't back there. We don't know what they did. This could have
Yeah.
definitely. They could have. Yes, I am waiting for that book now. That's on the list. That has to come after the Secret of Heroes Call, though. I just want you
Oh
to know
yeah,
that.
that'll be way down the line. I have to like research and stuff, and that'll probably never happen. So
That research is something that I always take as a grain of salt, because sometimes I'm like, well, if I'm making up stuff, I
yeah,
don't want to know how it really works. But then there's sometimes where it's like, all right, you just can't go crazy if you have it set in the real world.
yeah.
Like
When
at some point, like
yeah,
you gotta have some real stuff in there.
yeah.
But it's like, where do you draw the line of what you need to research, and then at the same time, but I also want to do my own thing, so I
Yeah.
don't care how the laws of physics work.
Yeah. Yeah, when it's like a historical fiction, you kind of have to have the history at least somewhat accurate.
Hmm.
Even if you're going to make some stuff up, it has to be at least somewhat within the confines of actual history, which is the part I don't like about it, which is why it's always on the back burner.
That's why a lot of my stuff takes place either off Earth or like in the fantasy part that the real people don't know about. So it's like I can
Yeah,
make up my own rules. 'Cause I'm like, I didn't want to
exactly.
have to follow rules that were already
Yeah.
made.
Yeah. You don't know how stuff works on other planets, so you've never been
Mhm.
there. You can't tell me I'm wrong because you don't know.
You don't know how a spaceship could stay hidden from all the satellites because they are more advanced. You don't know.
Exactly.
Well, that is all the time that we have tonight. But I will make sure to upload all of his social links to Anchor when this drops on the podcast on Friday. Ben, thank you for joining me tonight for this chat. I hope you had fun because I did.
Oh, I had so much fun. Thank you so much for letting me come on and talk to you. It was a blast.
No problem. Um, so, as always, I'm Andrea Rose Washington, and we will see you next time.